Welcome to the Retirement Roadmap by SHP Financial, a podcast empowering today's retirees and pre-retirees to make well-informed financial decisions that will help you spend more time living and dreaming than worrying and wondering. Join me, Matthew Peck, along with my co-hosts, Derek Gregoire and Keith Ellis, as we share actionable financial strategies and insights, as well as interview top thought leaders in the world of finance, accounting, and estate planning. This is all aimed at preparing you for the retirement you've always dreamed of. Our high-quality holistic planning process has helped thousands of families retire and create what we like to call the ripple effect. The Retirement Roadmap is your guide to financial freedom. Are you ready to get started? Let's go. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of SHP Financial's Retirement Roadmap podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Peck. Joined today by Laura Russo, really actually through popular demand, because everyone has been watching our quarterly market updates. Everyone's watching, watching it as well as on the podcast, and we're getting this incredible feedback. People are like, "Okay, Matt, you're doing a great job. You're explaining the markets well, but could Laura do more? People want to hear from Laura more."
I get that a lot. I know, Matt. Yeah. I know. It's hard. It's hard to be next to this shining right here.
Absolutely.
We gotta get you some sunglasses.
Exactly. All that spotlight. we need to really shift it over there.
Yeah.
And so we said, you know what? Let's dedicate this podcast to something that's sort of near and dear to your heart.
Mm-hmm.
I know your husband obviously works in this field as well. And what we're talking about, folks, is college planning, 529s, FAFSA, affordability, options. I mean, when I say options, about where to go and things along those lines, I mean, I don't think you can read a headline today without getting amazed at the cost of education and higher education. I mean, some of these schools are pushing six figures now, which is just mind-boggling to me. And so our clients, our listeners on the podcast, our clients, I'm sure everyone is wondering, what's the best way of funding colleges? What's the best way as a grandparent to help out? What's the best way as a parent to help out? What's FAFSA? What's loans? How's it working together? So long story short, listeners, this is what we wanted to do. Laura has been so kind to rejoin us, done a whole lot of research into this particular area, and I'm really excited for you to join us.
Thanks, Matt. It's great to be here. And again, I think you hit the nail on the head. This is a subject that just because you might be in retirement doesn't mean it doesn't quite hit you. A lot of our clients, a lot of the people we speak with have grandchildren who are entering into college. And it's a whole nother beast, a whole nother area to plan for, that we feel like there's some opportunities. And there's also some misconceptions out there that we want to kind of unpack a little bit today. So I think let's just dive right in. And a big area that I think we see as a missed opportunity, or an area that people aren't taking advantage of, is having direct tuition payments for a grandparent over to colleges directly.
Okay, so let me pause you there. So that's usually like the first place you start when you're explaining to people, okay, here's something you need to know about 529s or college funding, is this idea of paying directly to the college. Okay, so how does this work?
Yeah, so basically, and it is a good point, a lot of people come in and say, hey, how can I help pay for college for my grandchild? And the first area, you already hit it. 529s. That's the one everybody knows about. That's the one that everybody's saying, should I do this? We're going to definitely unpack that a little bit more. But actually, I think one of the friendliest ways is these types of direct tuition payments to a college. So as a grandparent, you're writing the check directly to University of Massachusetts, Amherst. I'm using that as an example because that's my alma mater. And you're not letting that money go to the parent, to the child. It's going directly to the institution. Now, you might be asking, Matt, why would we do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Laura, why would we do that?
So the reason why you would do that is because it's so tax friendly. It's tax free. It's a gift, but it doesn't have the constraints of the annual gift exclusion amount. And Matt, pop quiz, what's the annual gift exclusion amount?
Ooh, $13,500. Or since we're in 2026, has it gone up?
It's $19,000 that we can give.
Oh, $19,000.
That's okay. It was a little bit of a trick question there.
Well, but let me ask you this, though, because we talked about the gift exclusion, $19,000 that we can give per person. What about tax deductions? I mean, so let's say someone cuts a check to UMass for whatever, 30,000. I'm not even sure how much UMass is for in-state or out-of-state. Is it really? Oh gosh, I'm dating myself again. But is there any tax deductions for the person that's like? Does that end up as an itemized deduction or anything like that?
Good question. So it's not a tax deduction.
Okay.
We can talk about tax deductions on 529s.
Okay.
It's actually more for heavily leaning into the idea of that gift exclusion amount or gifting, right?
Right.
So we talk about this a lot with our clients when we have clients who might have a net worth that's starting to maybe touch the line of, we might be hitting over and above thresholds for now we might be susceptible to the estate tax, right?
Okay.
So you have a lifetime gift exclusion amount. So basically, Matt, you have an amount that you can use for your lifetime that you can gift away without paying any taxes or without paying anything over and above that. Now, people don't actually know this, and many people don't truly hit this, but the gift tax amount over and above that exclusion is pretty hefty. It can go up to 40% on the high end. So, yeah. It costs money to be charitable.
Right.
So by having a avenue where we actually don't even have to think about any limitations with tuition. So you could have a $70,000 tuition payment that you want to pay for as a grandparent. You don't have to worry about it borrowing against your lifetime gift exclusion amount, and you don't have to worry about it on the annual basis of that $19,000 per person.
Well, and I think too, a lot of times clients will ask, obviously they want to have an impact on their kids or their grandkids' lives specifically. And this is a direct, I mean, because you talk about gifting and doing these, the annual exclusions. Well, when you gift it directly to the child, there's no real strings attached, right? I mean, officially, when that kid becomes 18 years old or becomes a legal adult, whatever gift that the grandparent gave can be used for a
motorcycle.
Hot rod. Yeah, exactly.
Hot rod, yes.
Yeah, just something that wouldn't exactly be the most productive or constructive for their careers. Whereas this gift directly, or I don't know if to call it a gift or not, but the idea of paying tuition directly to the college, it basically guarantees that it has to be used for education.
Absolutely, Matt. You just hit the nail on the head. That is a huge part of it, is you as a grandparent have that control where you can say, you know what, little Johnny really likes hot rods and guns and cigarettes, and no, I'm just kidding, and I really don't want my money going to cigarettes and
right,
booze.
Absolutely. All the sin stocks, yeah.
Little Johnny lives on the edge ever since he was a toddler.
Yeah, no, exactly. This guy's wild.
Yep. You've had to have a really sharp eye on Johnny. But instead, you could say, hey, little Johnny, I want you to turn your life around. I will give $20,000 directly for your education if you go to school. And that might be the moment where little Johnny says, I'm giving up
he's
life.
turning his life around right there with that one gift. But
that one gift might change his life.
But I love that idea because specifically is the fact that it's direct. It's sort of like off the record, pretty much, because just for everyone to know is that if you gift more than $19,000, it's not necessarily a taxable event, but you have to report it.
Correct.
It's a reportable event.
Correct.
Whereas, so you could gift, let's say again, $30,000 or not even gift or whatever, pay the tuition for $30,000 or $50,000, and you don't report it anywhere. So you just pay the bill.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yep,
okay.
Exactly. Now, if you were to just gift that money away instead, like you said, you would have to report that. There's a special form, Form 709, I believe what it is. Don't quote me on that. But it's a special form that lets the IRS know, hi, IRS, just an FYI, I borrowed against my lifetime gift exclusion amount, which right now might not seem like a big deal, but let's say down the road, they really shrink that exclusion amount. Because right now, most people federally are not going to hit that limit. Maybe on a statewide, some people are definitely seeing that. But if they shrink that down, let's say the federal limit goes down to more of what state levels are, let's say 2 million, 4 million, that's a lot easier to hit. And if you've already borrowed a good chunk against it, who knows? Down the road, you might be kind of kicking yourself that you utilize that, where in this case, you're still reducing your total estate, but gifting directly to the college institutions.
Okay. So to kind of reframe it, right? client comes to you and they says, "Okay, Laura, I'd like to help out my grandson or daughter, or we'll go back to little Johnny. I'd like to help."
Well, now
I'd like
he's
to,
good, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Now he's good Johnny.
good little Johnny. I'd like to help him out with college tuition specifically. So, number one, you say option A is this idea of paying tuition directly. Okay, so that's the best because it's most tax efficient. Kind of again off the books, doesn't affect your gift exclusion or whatever it may be. Okay, what's option B?
Yeah,
when you're talking to the parents or the clients.
Yeah, and option A is great if we're looking at a kid who's a couple years out from college, right? But if you have a brand new grandbaby and you want to do something now, 529s are that area where we talk about them a lot, but that's a really strong area for you to be able to gift into. Now, 529s are education accounts. They're very strict about having it be for very certain things. You know, it has to be for tuition, room and board, books, supplies, certain K through 12 expenses. In previous years, they were even more stringent. You know, it was very strict, and they're kind of just starting to open up that avenue a little bit. But this is really going to be money that is allowed to grow tax-free. And when you take money out for those specific uses, you don't pay taxes on it. So you can put money in here and you can have that grow tax-free, as opposed to, let's say you had that same amount of money growing in an after-tax account. As you have growth and you have realized gains, things like that, you can quickly start to see some of the taxes adding up there.
Okay, so 529s are an account that grow tax-free. There's no tax deduction on the way in.
Correct.
But it grows tax-free, and as long as it's used for these qualified expenses, it's also, grows tax-free, and you withdraw it tax-free.
Yep.
Right? So it has that level of it. But how do we get money into it? Who's the owner? Who are the beneficiaries? How is it invested?
Yep, good question. So contributions going in are not tax-free in some states. In others, they are. So we do have some states that are a little bit more friendly. And luckily for us in Massachusetts, we do have a little bit of a deduction that can be taken there. So you can take $1,000 for single filers, $2,000 for married couples. But definitely check in with your financial advisor. In some cases, a grandparent contribution might not count and might have to be a parent only. But that's going to be an area you definitely want to check in specifically on. Now, when it comes to the 529s, there's a lot that we see here where people say, well, I don't know if I really want to put money in there because what if little Johnny was going back on the bad side? Poor little Johnny.
On or off. Yeah, right, exactly. And just gets on and off the wagon each time.
Exactly. He's having a rough time.
Hypothetically speaking, of course.
Okay,
right.
Hypothetically speaking, little Johnny says, I'm not going to college. I want to do something else, which is a great path in certain areas for, for some families. But let's say now we have a good chunk of money in a 529, and the worry is that, well, what's going to happen to that money? Well, we have some options now that are actually relatively new to us, where if a 529, let's say that's, that child does not want to go to college, we can actually start to roll over into a Roth. So they can have the annual amount, $7,500 for this year, that they could roll over into a Roth account, Roth retirement account, or a Roth IRA that they can use for retirement. So it's not necessarily strictly within the 529 anymore. Now there's a certain amount that you can do up to, I believe it's around $32,000 if I remember correctly, for the actual
annual lifetime maximum.
The lifetime max. So
yep.
$7,500 until you hit that max. So you can't do that full amount in 1 year, but you can do it every single year until you hit that max amount. You can also transfer the 529 to a different beneficiary. So let's say little Johnny has a sister who is on the straight and narrow and is headed straight for college. She might have a 529 that they used up quickly because maybe she went to an Ivy League school or something like that. Well, any amount that was left over, we can start to roll over.
Okay, so grandparents become the owner in this situation. Grandparents are the owner and controller of the 529 account, again, in this example, and then they choose a sort of a beneficiary that the fund is going to be used for, and then whether or not, so let's say little Johnny, back to that situation, little Johnny uses it, great. Little Johnny doesn't use it, he can fund his Roth with, up to an annual or lifetime maximum. And then if there's still funds left over, you could transfer it from Johnny to his sister, call it Mary in this situation. So that's kind of that's the little bit of the mechanics on kind of how it works. But what are the differences between like a grandparent owning it versus a parent owning it? Let's say I'm a grandparent and say, no, I'm just going to give my son, little Johnny's dad, I'm just going to give him $15,000 and he'll put it into the 529. I mean, what's the best for ownership of the 529, the person that's actually controlling it?
Great question. So if you were to ask this question in 2024, the answer would be different. 2025 actually just recently had some changes to legislation, the simplification of college savings act, something along those lines. But basically, a 529 owned by a parent versus by a grandparent have a little bit of a different treatment in that when it's owned by a parent, and the parent then starts to apply for FAFSA, which we'll go there in a little bit, that's an asset that's going to be counted in FAFSA. Now, previously, if it was owned by a grandparent, it's off the books, still off the books technically, but any distributions from the 529 that was grandparent owned would be counted as income to the student. And that is actually an area where it's been a pitfall for many people because let's say they say, oh, great, I have this huge 529 that my grandparents own for me. I can take money out. I don't have to worry about it on my FAFSA. But then the year that they take that money out, let's say they took $40,000 out, that was counted towards their income. So the following year for FAFSA, they were reduced, basically.
The withdrawals were counted towards? Okay, I thought it was just like interest or gain or whatever, but the actual withdrawals, well, ouch.
So
okay.
that's
I'm
an
glad
area
they
where,
fixed that. So that's no longer the case. Okay.
Exactly. And that's an area where we would see a lot of times people saying, shoot, now I almost don't want to take money out of here because it's starting to affect the eligibility that we were getting for certain financial aid. So that's a huge change and a huge green flag for us that it is great to have grandparent-owned 529s now, because now not only are those income distributions not counted, but it's off the books for FAFSA.
Yeah.
So it's not on the parent's name, it's on the grandparent's name.
And just to kind of combine two things we talked about, the gifting exclusion, if you don't mind, Laura, the 529s, I believe, have a super funding ability. I don't know if you've seen that before, but that 5-year super fund.
Yep, you can super fund it.
Okay, okay, grandparent opens it up, and now that the FAFSA situation is such as a kinder treatment, where there's no income or anything like that, it's basically off the books if the grandparent owns it, and again, it's for the benefit of little Johnny. And we talked about how there's these annual gift exclusions of $19,000 and different things like that. But 529s are kind of unique in regards that they allow for something called a super fund. Mm-hmm. So if you don't mind walking our listeners through what that is.
Yep, a super fund is basically when you're bunching up a few years worth of your contribution amount, so that $19,000. Couple years all bunched up together so that you can do one large contribution into it. I don't remember the amount off the top of my head. I believe it's $130,000, I want to say, within that range that you can put into the 529 all at one big shot. And it's still not going to count as a large, over that gift exclusion amount.
Right. So imagine that, ladies and gentlemen. It's like, let's say, you've done very, very well. You want to help out your grandkids. You're bumping into these state tax limits, and you say, okay, I'd like to gift to get my estate lower, and I want to gift in a very targeted way towards education. With the super fund, you open up the 529, and it's not like $19,000 a year for the next 5 years. You can put all 5 of those years all once. Once little Johnny was born, you can do 100 and whatever, call it 120 just to round up. You can do that all at once, and so suddenly your estate's lower by $120,000. Little Johnny's account is sort of accelerated. It's like, gasoline on that. Where now by the time he's 18, it will hopefully cover most, if not all. Again, back to the affordability issue. It's a different, the rise in cost is a different story. We'll leave that for a different podcast. But just the idea that you can open it up and really get it going fast. Yeah. That's something I really wanted to get across.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we've opened it up. We've either funded it a little bit at a time or we super funded it. And now we're just talking about how it's not impacting the FAFSA. Okay, what's FAFSA?
Okay, before we jump into FAFSA, one little point I do want to make, just kind of the difference between doing the direct tuition payments and the 529s and what the pros and cons
option
there.
A and option B.
Yeah,
here.
exactly, because you just triggered that in my mind that's a good point to really lean in on, is that if you wanted to do those tuition payments directly, that's great, like I said, if you have a grandchild who is of college age or close to college age. The 529s would be great for someone who has younger grandchildren, and maybe this is more of a kind of legacy piece because you can't guarantee that you might be there when they enter into college.
Well, and also, too, I mean, it's not like these are mutually exclusive. So let's say you have a grandson that's 16 years old, and then you have a granddaughter that's 16 months old. Okay, go for option A in regards to that. Consider, obviously, talk to your financial advisor. These are not blanket recommendations for all. But some, for the 16-year-old grandson, you should probably explore direct payments. For that 16-month-year-old granddaughter, you should explore 529.
Yeah, definitely.
To kind of oversimplify it a bit.
Definitely. And one other area that's very cool that a lot of people don't know about is there's actually another type of 529. This is a 529A.
Okay, I've not heard of that.
Okay, so a 529A, also known as an ABLE account, is an account very similar to a regular 529, but it's specifically for people with disabilities. And it can have actually a little bit more flexibility to it. So these types of accounts, the recipient must have disability onset before age 46, so a lot more flexibility there, right? Previously it was 26, and they changed that so that it allows for more money to go into these types of accounts. And it can be used, again, money goes in tax-free, gross tax-free. It has more flexibility for what it's allowed for. So people with disabilities may not be going to a traditional style college, right? But it allows for more flexibility with health programs, with education or job training support, which is amazing. So if you have a grandchild that has a disability, and you might not know how to give to them because they have very stringent means as far as sometimes they're, on getting some benefits from the state and getting some really great and needed benefits to help them. If you give too much to them, you might exclude them from those benefits. So this 529A account, you can have up to $100,000 into this account, and it's excluded from them losing any of those really important and necessary benefits that they're getting.
Oh, that's fantastic. And think about that, too. I mean, because not to get too far off topic, but we talk in terms of special needs trusts, and when it comes to estate planning for a grandson or a granddaughter that does have special needs, we work with attorneys to set up special needs trusts so that upon the death, they're funding this account that is also outside of benefits and things along those lines. But you can now kind of combine a 529A with special needs trusts to really round out the benefits and the services that they can receive while not disrupting, Mass Health or whatever Medicaid or whatever benefit program they're on. So that's fantastic, especially for people that are battling or working their way through what can be a challenging situation.
They might not feel like they have the same, ability to give to grandchildren. They feel like they might not have that same, freeness to say, I'd love to give my grandchild this money, but I don't want them to lose any of their benefits. So $100,000 in that account is a lot can be done there. So that's huge.
No, absolutely. No, thank you for sharing that.
Now, Matt, go back to your question on FAFSA.
So let's talk about FAFSA, mainly because everyone, and actually as a parent of a 16-year-old son, I need to know this. So that's the part too. I'm dutifully taking notes the entire time, Laura. Like I was very selfish, like, we're talking 529s. This is great. But okay, so what is FAFSA? How does this work? How does it interact with the 529s? How does it interact at all with direct tuition? Now show us this world.
Absolutely. So I am very lucky. I'm married to a man who works in the college system, and this is sometimes for fun with the Russo household. We love to talk about this stuff, right? We're weird, okay? So some nights over dinner, we put the little one down.
If you ever wonder why, like when the invitation to come over for dinner, like I don't show, I'm suddenly sick.
We're like, oh no, she's gonna
now you
kind of
know, this. Gives you a little indication.
So I love to pick his brain. I love to really ask these questions. And this is a while back really started sparking the idea that this would be a great podcast for us because FAFSA, it's a whole nother beast and people are familiar with the name, but they really don't understand some of the mechanics of it. And I'm by no means the expert here, but anything that we can do to better prepare ourselves is going to make a lot of strides towards positioning yourself to be really, in good shape.
And just to interject quickly, this is almost like the first chunk or first section of the podcast was really focused on grandparents. FAFSA really is the parents themselves,
Correct.
right? Okay, so it's not like grandparents are helping out with unless they're obviously caring for the child, but assuming that's the normal order of things, FAFSA really becomes the parent of the student. This is their world. This is when they need to listen up.
Absolutely.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid, FAFSA. And it is something that everyone has to apply for when they are applying for colleges. So you might not necessarily think that you are going to receive any financial aid, but you still have to apply in the beginning. And basically what this does is it helps us parents and it helps us to understand how much we would be eligible for financial aid. Now, the misconception oftentimes is that financial aid is just that check that they write out of here's, fully paid tuition, you're all set. That is becoming more and more rare for people because as people are, saving money and as they're really doing a good job building up their careers, it's no longer a thing where you can get that, hide and try and be, really savvy about it. It's hard to do that. That's a big misconception is that you can plan ahead and somehow get that to be zero.
Yeah, I get to kick out of when people sit down, whether it's FAFSA, whether it's nursing homes, taxes, so forth. Like, what about this? What if I do this? And it's like, no, my friend, they thought about that too. They have people they're good at their jobs, and I appreciate the thought. Like, I always love that effort. Like, oh, what if we do this?
Yeah.
And it's like, nope, they thought of that too. So yeah, as you're saying, FAFSA is there's no really hiding from it anymore.
Exactly.
Just accept what it is. But what's interesting, and you told me offline, is that different things are weighted. So
Correct.
So okay. So let's talk in terms of a grandparent-owned 529
Yep.
versus a parent-owned 529 versus
Money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Grandparent-owned 529 is going to be a golden ticket there because it is not included on a FAFSA application. So all intensive purposes and what we kind of jokingly said beforehand is it's off the books, okay? So it's completely on a separate silo. They don't have the access to see how much is in there. And now that change has come through where income provisions aren't heavily weighted towards the student, that's the Willy Wonka golden ticket right there. So those are huge. Now, having a parent-owned 529 isn't a bad thing. It's great too. It is going to be having some weight within the application, but it's not as heavily weighted as certain other accounts.
Does it do the income thing where if they would do withdrawals, does that, does the withdrawal impact? Okay.
So that's been the new change for 2025.
Okay. Because a lot of these applications, government applications will split up assets into or split up accounts into, is it an income or is it an asset?
Mm-hmm.
So far the grandfather owned account is neither income nor an asset.
Mm-hmm.
Now a parent owned 529 is an asset. It does get weighted, but the income still isn't impacted.
So you got it. He can be taught.
All right. Yep, absolutely. Again, I'm dutifully taking notes here, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah.
Now, if you have money in a student account, that is the worst place to have money because they are going to have the heaviest weight. Now, think of it. These kids, we see them as kids, but they're coming in as individuals. And so, therefore, any money in their own account is going to be weighted heavier than a parent account and then the grandparent account, which is completely off the books there. So having assets there is probably one of the worst things you can do. And the hard part is, and I don't think that the man or, the wants people to know this, but think of how much money some college students get on their graduation party, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And where does that money go?
Usually into their pockets?
Into their pockets, into their checking accounts.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, all that money that they just received as a gift is now heavier weighted on their FAFSA for the next year that they're applying.
Well, and I think just to kind of broaden the conversation, that's why I love what we do is because it's not, we're not magic workers or, magicians or anything like that. It's just the fact that if you know the systems and you know what's this is law, this is how the accounts work. Obviously it changes a lot, right? But the main point is the fact that, again, it's not like rocket science. It's just doing the homework and the research and know, here's your goal. And what's the most efficient way of achieving that goal? And really, it's what that's at the very, very basic level. That's what it is. And a lot of people have very honorable goals of giving a gift to their grandson or granddaughter at graduation. But next thing you know, it kind of blows up in their face. And it's like, no, okay, stop. Okay, we want to do a gift. That's great. But here's a better way of doing it. And this podcast really symbolizes that.
Exactly. So definitely want to avoid having a large amount of money in the student's name. And of course, every family is different. We get it. It's not that clear for every single family dynamic. But if possible, having that money at least in the parent's name, maybe a separate account that's just earmarked for the child, can be helpful. And what is going to be actually used on these types of applications for the parents, that's going to include their checking accounts, brokerage accounts, 529s, and that's going to be under the expected family contribution, the EFC. So your EFC is your expected family contribution. And that's essentially what it's going to be, is that magic number that they populate at the end of the application once they've processed and say, all right, your family is expected to contribute X amount, $20,000, $15,000, $100,000. It depends.
Okay, so they give you a final number, not like a percentage where we're going to give you 15% off the tuition or whatever that may be. And is FAFSA the same as, sometimes I'll hear about like, this school gave me this and this school gave me that, right?
Yeah.
So there's the FAFSA system, and then the schools, the colleges themselves have like a separate system?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you think of, especially being in Massachusetts, we have some amazing colleges, in New England, amazing colleges, and they've been around a long time, right? So there are some big endowment funds. There's some big grants there that students can apply for. So that's a completely separate application, and each school might have their own, and it's actually a lot more rigorous. So if you're...
do the same rules apply, though, or are they different? So it's different rules,
rules too.
Okay.
Yeah, a little bit different. So, for example, for FAFSA, they don't really care about your property as much. They're not going to ask you how much the value of your residence is. They're not going to ask you much about your family business, whereas that second level of application is going to ask you that. So that's where you're going to see it's a bit more of that rigorous testing, because they obviously want to make sure money is going to students who need it. So if you live in a $10 million home, let's say, on FAFSA, they don't care, right? On the other secondary type of school specific, they're going to ask you that.
Okay, but at the same time, let's just say you do make it through there. You'll sometimes get sort of two benefits. You'll get like a federal student loan, if you will, and then a loan from the college, or the college will just give you a grant. But there are, if you pass those tests, you will receive aid from both parties.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes, and this is where
I just didn't know if like
confusing.
I didn't know if one like canceled out the other. If FAFSA's like, whoa, you're getting money from Harvard or whatever. Like, we're not going to, now you have to pay more because now we know that, Harvard's giving you however much money.
Yep. So FAFSA is going to have, potentially some money that they might help to cover, where it's saying, okay, we see some need here. We're going to give you $20,000. Okay. And that is just money that you get as kind of that aid, right? But it also is what's in connection towards federal loans as well. So it's going to say, we aren't going to give you aid, but we are going to give you federal loans, which you will go forward with. And most people have some type of federal loan. And that's what's going to be used to, after graduation, you're going to start seeing that student loan balance.
Yeah, it's like, what, 6 months after you graduate or whatever that may be.
Yeah,
they
don't give you a lot of time.
Time to pay back.
And that's where a lot of people, a lot of the students, and, it's hard, as I think we see generations come through where they're starting to say, oh, wow, I paid a lot of money and now I have student loans for the next 15 years.
Well, and that's what I was going to say, too. I mean, it's a separate podcast in regards to the value of college education based on how high it's been, when you compare it to the trades, when you compare it to what it once was. I mean, that's a whole other podcast, and I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but especially with AI, too, you can bring AI into it and making certain jobs potentially obsolete. I mean, it's a very problematic area right now. And I'm specifically saying from a parent right? I mean, I like the fact that we've obviously have a good handle on how to fund it and how to navigate the system. It's just sometimes you can be frustrated with the system simultaneously as not, understanding it and still being frustrated is possible. That's also not mutually exclusive. I'd like to point out.
Matt, you make such a good point there, and this is an area where I think parents and grandparents can really do a good job. Is that you are the guiding person for these students, right? Many students start to apply to colleges just based on, I like this one because I think it has a cool campus. I like this one because it has a great recognition and name.
All right, just because, again, I'm talking about as a parent from a 16-year-old, and it's like, TikTok, like all these like TikTok videos, and like, it's like, oh, that guy's got a great football program. That's literally what I'm getting. He's like, hey, why do you want to go to like Clemson? He's like, oh, well, they got good football. I'm like, okay, is that really the decision that we're trying to make here?
Coming from one of my nieces at Clemson, it is expensive. It's not a cheap school. And
but literally, it's like my main point is the fact that social media is like influencing where these kids want to go, not because of education or what it's like, oh, I want to major in this, so this is where I want to be. It's like, no, they had a really cool, snappy, social media video.
So MEFA, MEFA.org, is a Massachusetts-based education, I don't want to say lending system, but it's a program that's Massachusetts-based. They have an amazing calculator online that you can go on and basically sit down with the student and say, here are all the packages that you received. Let's plug all of them in, and it will tell us how much this college is actually going to cost. But again, I think this is the opportunity for many times, and Matt and I were talking about this a little bit offline, is that this is actually kind of the gateway and the first time that a parent and student may have a conversation about parents' finances. So this is a really important moment for them to be able to set themselves up and their children up for success. And I get it. It's not an easy conversation to have. But if a parent can sit down and say, hey, listen, these are the options. This is what we can afford as a family. Here's the pros and cons of going to the big shiny school that has the great name, the great campus, the great football program. Here's the benefits of long-term, maybe going to, shockingly, a community college for the first few years. Now, I'm a huge proponent of community college, not only because my husband works at one, but because it is one of the best things you can do financially for yourself. If you go to community college, it's free in Massachusetts. Are you kidding me?
Yes. I'm sorry, it's what?
Free. So that means you can get your gen eds done. Do you really need to pay $60,000, $70,000 a year to take math and English and get your, basically level 2 of high school done? Or can you be really savvy about this and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to get everything out of the way for the first 2 years, and then I won't feel as bad going to that bigger, brand name school. But what's actually incredible about Massachusetts is that we have a program that if you go to community college, you have guaranteed acceptance to any Massachusetts state school. That's huge. And when you graduate, when you walk, you get that diploma. So I think that's huge. I think that is an area that a lot of parents really should be, I don't want to say pushing towards, but helping to really explain and say, listen, and coming from the, millennial side, which, all of my counterparts, I will tell you right now, I guarantee you're going to see huge surges of that because we've paid student loans. We've seen how much it, for lack of a better word, sucks to see, 40% of your paycheck go to a student loan. And for many, many people, they went to college and they might not even be using their degree in the way that they thought they would be.
No, and it's part of like a general, I'll go back to that word, affordability issue, because let's say, hey, we want these young kids.
Youngsters.
We want these little guys to, but no, all joking aside, that, we want them to get their first home. We want them to sort of put a down payment on and really put roots down. And how can you possibly even consider putting roots down when you still have hundreds and thousands of dollars or however many thousands of dollars in student loan debt? It's like, it's this massive angle banker that holds back. So there isn't necessarily a failure to launch here, ladies and gentlemen. This is people who have loans. I'd love to launch. I'd love to not live with my mom and dad, but guess what? I have $75,000, or as you said, 40% of my paycheck is going towards this loan. So it's don't hate on the younger generation, because they might be dealing with stuff that you did not have to deal with.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let me go back to the top. So we started this conversation with just sort of strategies on 529, strategies on in regards to financial planning. I'm sorry, financial aid, FAFSA, 529s, 529As, giving directly to the college themselves. So really covered a lot of areas. Is there any area that we didn't cover, Laura, that you wanted to, or any kind of final thoughts on each of those strategies?
Yeah, one other area that I would highly recommend people explore is doing scholarships, doing grants, and applying for them. Now, a lot of these have early applications. Highly recommend being early applicants. Back in the day, it wasn't quite as important. Now, it's almost like if you see early application deadlines, think of that as your deadline, because they are going to get preferential treatment, and it is getting more and more competitive. But utilizing things outside of the student loans, like, if you have a student work base where you can get money basically to work at the college, and you can use it for whatever, but using those are going to just help add a little bit extra cushion there, and applying for any scholarship under the sun. There are so many foundations out there, private foundations, nothing to do with the college, that, are local within your town. So
so how do they find them? Is that
online.
MIFA too, or no? Because you mentioned MIFA does that in regards to like how much you can afford, but does MIFA have a list of scholarships as well?
So I don't know if they necessarily have private foundation scholarships, but everything's online these days. So look up Town of Plymouth private foundation, private scholarships, and see what pulls up. High schools also have these lists. So go to your guidance counselors, go to the administration office and say, hey, do you guys have a list of private foundations for the state or for the town? And do all of the applications. Not only is it great reps for the student, because they're learning how to write proposals almost, if you will. They're learning how to do these essays, quick turnaround time, but that's free money that's completely off the table from what you, would just naturally get through FAFSA. So scholarships, foundations, they just give away money to local kids. So why not take advantage of that?
Oh, that's fantastic. And so, I mean, this has been great. I kind of want to I want to download all of this to make sure I understand it. But to really summarize, folks, if you are a grandparent and you want to help out your grandson or daughter, and it's really college focused, one thing you consider is giving directly to the college itself. Works very, very well for people that are 2 years away from college, and you might not have a chance to get their savings accounts really started. Now, if you have a 16-month-old grandson or granddaughter and you want to do a 529s, things to consider is who is the owner of that. How much do you want to fund per year? Do you want a super fund? Do you not want a super fund? Knowing that there's flexibility now, that these can be rolled over into Roth IRAs. They can be transferred to different grandson or granddaughters as well. So some interesting strategies there. Then for parents, FAFSA, the whole world of FAFSA, understanding what counts and what doesn't count. Go ahead and hit repeat or rewind a couple times, and Laura will walk you through all of that right there. But two things, and then also again looking into scholarships, I think is
work
great.
Study scholarships.
Yeah, but I really wanted to hit that point that you talked about that I really want to end with is that any opportunity that you have to talk to family about finances, about sort of just financial literacy, right? Walking your kids or grandkids or whomever through this world. I mean, there are such decisions that have these long-term consequences, and to understand how they work, to understand the pros and the cons and the trade-offs, to say, okay, hey, I can go to community college and 2 years transfer into a state school, and I'm getting that state school diploma, not the 4 C's or whatever it may be. If you're afraid, if you don't want that kind of, because you want that sort of state school diploma. But I mean, people sometimes don't talk about finance like it's like politics, and it's like, look, you really have to. I mean, I know it's awkward conversations and whatnot, but people need to understand the consequences of these decisions, and compounding interest working against you. We talk about compounding interest working for you, which is what we want to do. But it all boils down to just making wise decisions, making well-informed decisions. decisions, making decisions in the most efficient manner for you, for the family, for everyone involved. And, that's something we just love doing every single day. So hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. Any final thoughts, Laura?
No, I think we covered it. And you're right. Those conversations, it's going to be the difference between someone who has such huge financial success towards others who have to fight and learn their way through it. So if you're a grandparent listening to this saying, this doesn't quite feel like it hits me, well, the big takeaway would be, yes, it does, because you might have actually a little bit more weight to a grandchild than a parent does. Because a parent, Matt, you know this, you could talk certain things so you're blue in the face to your kids, and they're not going to, they're going to be like, whatever, Dad.
Absolutely.
But if grandpa, grandma sits down and says, okay, they're not my parent. I might have a little bit of a different attitude towards them. You might be able to help them really make a huge difference with their decisions on where they go to school, how much they're going to pay. A lot of these kids get suckered into the TikToks and the marketing of some schools that are extremely expensive. The return on investment just isn't there, in all honesty. So if you can help them to learn that and to know the difference, you're going to set them up to maybe save hundreds of thousands of dollars in the future.
No, absolutely. Laura, again, thank you so much. You accomplished that goal too, which was to let me speak less and you speak more. So I think we also accomplished that goal in a very efficient manner. But thanks so much for this great information, to say the least. Thanks so much for joining us. You're a repeat guest, so I guess joining us again. But thank you for all of our listeners for listening to the SHP Retirement Podcast. And everyone else, be well.
Thanks for listening to the Retirement Roadmap Podcast by SHP Financial. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button so future episodes are automatically downloaded directly to your device. And if you've liked what you heard, please share the show. Create your own little ripples so we can help even more people with their retirement goals. If you want access to all past interviews, including notes, resources, and exclusive content from SHP Financial, visit shpfinancial.com/podcast. Thanks again for joining us on the Retirement Roadmap Podcast. And for all the attorneys out there, and disclaimers and disclosures, I'm just going to put on my super serious voice and add our own. No statements made during the Retirement Roadmap Podcast shall constitute tax, legal, or accounting advice. You should consult your own legal or tax professional on any such matters. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk, and unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Our investment advisory services are offered through SHP Wealth Management, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Insurance sales are offered through SHP Financial, LLC. Our advisors and insurance reps may offer clients advice and/or products from each entity. No client is under any obligation to purchase any insurance product.